strong, stiff stench of fascism fills the air. It offends my senses. The New World odor has a certain smell about it. The smell of death. Today we're going to be talking about the American Holocaust, the second in the Clinton administration, with a man who has had 27.5 years of experience in the FBI, a man that has been head of the Bureau in Los Angeles, in Dallas, in Memphis, a man that F. Lee Bailey says is one of the most, if not the most, spectacular investigator in the United States of America, Ted Gunderson. Ted, let's take a look at what has occurred in the Oklahoma atrocity. This is the second American Holocaust that's been committed under the Clinton administration. Is this something that occurred as a result of talk show hosts like myself inspiring some crazies to get out there and take out a federal building, or is this not in fact something that was set up for the purpose of frightening the population of this nation into surrendering our rights for a new world order?
I'll have to say, in all honesty, in all sincerity, there's no question in my mind, and this is my opinion, that an incident occurred or was established or happened that was planned, and the purpose of that was to enrage the American public, and two, to make sure and force Congress to pass anti-terrorism legislation, which we do not need, but which at the same time would imperil our civil liberties and further erode our civil rights and help destroy what we believe in our Constitution.
Now let's go back in time to Nazi Germany, the year 1933. The Reichstag was burnt. Hitler blamed it on the opposition. And then afterwards he called for a surrender of the rights held by the people to the president. And I think it was Rudolf Hess who said, Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One world, one race, one ruler. Is this not, in fact, the same scenario that we are looking at today in 1995?
It certainly appears to be, certainly I feel that this has all been set up, and I think they built up to it. Like, for example, I recall Donahue had a show with the militants on there, and they wore their uniforms, and he kind of ridiculed them. This was back in January. Mm-hmm. And there have been other incidents in the media and the TV, mainly TV talk shows, where there was an attempt and has been effectively discredited the militia. So there's no question that what's happened here is after the fact, after the bombing, the attack by the president and by the government was directed at the militia, who did not have and could not under any circumstances had access to such a sophisticated bomb, which we will discuss in a few minutes. And also the attack was at the talk show hosts, radio talk show hosts.
Well, in other words, the attack was at any and all opposition to the president and those politicos who would surrender our sovereignty to a new world order and establish a global government upon the ashes of American sovereignty.
No question about it. The talk show hosts are the ones who are getting the news, the facts, the truth to the American people. It's not the mainstream media, the three major networks or the other networks either. The talk show hosts are the ones that are saying, hey, this is going on in America. You people better listen, because if you don't, you're in big trouble. Actually, we're in big trouble already. And I feel the last election where we had a number of incumbents who were voted out of office, I think the talk show hosts had more to do with that than any other single segment in our society.
Well, a friend of mine, Larry Nichols, has come out with the Clinton Chronicles, exposing the President of the United States for all of the treachery, and I say treason, that he has committed. I would like to see the President of the United States serve out the rest of his term in the big house, not the White House. The Watergate incident was nothing compared to this. This is an attack upon the citizenry of America, but not just those who were in the building, the war has been declared upon the people of the United States of America.
There's no question about it. This is probably the crime of the century, the crime of the last 200 years for our country, certainly. And it's very obvious to me, based on my investigation, the work that I've done, that McVeigh and John Doe II were only a part of this plot. And as a matter of fact,
Wait, that's Lee Harvey McVeigh?
Yes. Well, that's...
Well, I mean...
sorry, you're talking about the Kennedy assassination?
Yes, I mean, but isn't it...
I'm talking about the bombing.
I know, but isn't...
well, I see what you're saying, yes.
The same scenario. I mean, we're talking about...
Lee Harvey McVeigh,
the fall guy. I mean, the guy that's supposed to get caught.
Right.
Now, you've had experience in talking to individuals who have been deprogrammed from Project Monarch. This is a sleeper agent program where they developed, I'm talking about the CIA, has developed Manchurian-type candidates. Do you see the players in this as being part of that program?
I see this as a strong possibility. Now, Lee Harvey McVeigh, as you call him, okay, has said that he has an implant in his buttocks. He's also made the statement that he's a political prisoner. He was arrested by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol 90 minutes after the bombing, and he was incarcerated, of course, for some, I think, 2 or 3 days. And during that period, the FBI put out an artist conception of John Doe I and John Doe II, John Doe I being Lee Harvey McVeigh. And, but before that, the government put out the word to be alert for 2 Middle Eastern-like looking individuals in a blue pickup truck. I theorize, and this is strictly a theory, that the disinformation on the Middle Easterners was put out. McVeigh was supposed to have made a rendezvous afterwards. The beautiful highway patrolman from Oklahoma interrupted the plan, threw a monkey wrench in the machinery, arrested him. Then they had to come up with a plan. Well, okay, now we've got this fellow in jail. What do we do now? Then they came up with the artist conceptions. And then they say, oh, after all, he is in jail now. Aren't we fortunate that the Highway Patrol recognized him? You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Now, if McVeigh was involved, and if he was smart enough to put together a bomb that would take out half of that building, and he was some sort of mad solo bomber or even working with a group of other people, he would certainly have been smart enough to drive a car that had a license plate on it. And if he was stopped by the police, and after having done such a heinous crime, and he had a gun there, when the cop came up, he would have simply blown him away and driven off down the road. That makes sense. But what the government is trying to tell us, what the media is trying to tell us, makes no sense. It is nonsense. It is absolute absurdity in my mind.
Well, as you recall from watching the news, there was supposed to have been, I think, a light tan pickup truck that stopped in front of McVeigh when he was arrested by the Highway Patrol. There was supposed to have been a helicopter in the area at the time. They went on, and the officials are supposedly looking for the light tan pickup truck now. In fact, I think they've got may have some pictures of it, or they have a video camera on the Highway Patrol car, and they're trying to identify the license plate on it. I don't know if they've done anything about that or not. But the bottom line on this whole case is you can't believe anything that the government has put out, because I feel, adequate documentation that it was a barometric bomb and not a fertilizer bomb, and we'll go into more detail on that later.
Would you explain this? Because in our first conversation you were talking about a double explosion. The media hasn't talked about it. Time magazine hasn't talked about it. Newsweek, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the New York Times, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, they've mentioned not a single solitary word. Nothing. Nothing. And yet you have evidence that would support that. Do you want to tell us about it?
Well, of course. What happened was I received a fax, a routine matter to me, that from the University of Oklahoma Department of Geology. And this fact showed that there were 2 ground disturbances. One was at 9:02 a.m. and 13 seconds on the 19th of April. The second one was at 9:02 a.m. and 23 seconds, 10 seconds apart. I looked at that, and I thought to myself, and also I received information, of course, as to what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And to make sure, I called the University of Oklahoma, Dr. Ken Luza, and I asked the doctor himself, I said, I'm looking at this seismogram, would you interpret this for me? And he said, well, those two ground disturbances were ground waves,
Mm-hmm.
and there were two incidents that occurred in Oklahoma City on that time, at that time on that date. And I said, what does that mean to you? Would you tell me what that means? He says, that's an indication that there were two detonations, not one.
And you talked to who? At
Dr. Ken Luza.
Dr. Ken Luza at the University of Oklahoma.
Department of Geology.
Department of Geology. So having two separate explosions, does this indicate that it is the signature not of ammonium nitrate bomb, but of another device?
Absolutely. With that information, I made some phone calls around to my various sources and contacts. And in fact, the first phone call I made was to the person who I thought would know more about this situation than anybody as far as the bomb is concerned, a scientist who I have known for years, as a matter of fact. And I asked him, I said, let me describe the seismogram to you, what happened. As soon as I told him about that and the 10-second delay, he said, quote, that's my bomb, end quote. Meaning,
that's his bomb. In other words,
he developed it.
He developed the bomb.
Yes,
So a man that claims credit for developing the bomb says it's his bomb, and if it's his bomb, then it would, certainly didn't sell this bomb to individuals off the street or McVeigh's or the militia or somebody like that. He had to sell it to whom?
Well, I can say this. I can't get into details on that, but I can tell you this, that the government had access to this bomb. He told me that the government had access to this bomb.
Well, who else would use it but the government, right?
Of course.
So in other words, what you're saying or implying is that this is a government bomb.
Well, he told me that it's so complicated that you need a circuit board to detonate it. It's like setting off a nuclear explosion. It's not a fertilizer bomb, a 4,800-pound fertilizer bomb. And I think it's rather amusing, not amusing because of the tragedy involved here, but I think we have to go back and look at what the government put out. First of all, they said a car bomb with 1,000 pounds of fertilizer.
Well, wait a minute. Let me stop you right there for 1 second. You said it was a car bomb with 1,000 pounds of fertilizer.
Fertilizer bomb, yeah.
Yes, a fertilizer bomb. But I mean, they said that a couple hours after
almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But if they said that almost immediately, within 90 minutes, that would be almost immediately, wouldn't it? Within 90 minutes, they had ID'd the individual Lee Harvey McVeigh, right? They had ID'd him from the axle, the rear axle or the differential of the car that that blew up and sent this thing off the 2 blocks, right?
Something like that.
I
yes.
mean, that's what they said.
Sure.
They said it was a car.
That's what they said at first.
But if it really didn't come from the car, then they couldn't have placed it to the car and couldn't have attached him to it. So that's a lie.
Well, they said, first they said it was a car, then a pickup truck, a panel truck, and a 24-foot Ryder rental truck. But the weight of the bomb began at 1,000, then I think it was 1,100, then it was 2,000, 2,500, and now it's up to 4,800 pounds.
Now let's review that for the audience. Now, the government first said that it was a car bomb and it had 1,000 pounds, then it was 1,100 pounds, then they said it was a pickup truck with 1,500 pounds or 2,000 pounds, then 2,500, then they said it was a panel truck, then they said it was this fertilizer bomb was a Ryder truck. I mean, this wasn't a fertilizer bomb. The government's case, well, it's BS. This is a BS bomb, and it's a political bomb, and it's been dropped upon the population, not only of this country, but of the planet, because these people are going for global government. In my opinion, I see this as being engineered by the CIA, the ISA, or somebody like that, certainly not a bunch of people who are making little bottle bombs in their backyard and having fun like kids on the 4th of July.
Well, if they were going to set this up, and they did a nice job of setting it up, you're going to take somebody like McVeigh and John Doe too, You're going to have them setting off small explosives in a yard. Make sure the neighbors know about it. You're going to have them attend a militant meeting because, after all, that's one of the targets.
Oh, they would set him up like that.
They set him up this way, right? They set him up this way.
Prepare the credentials.
Right.
Right.
To prepare the credentials, to give them the background, the basis for everybody to go after the militants, and to say that McVeigh was a militant and John Doe too, obviously militant. Now they say, they first came out, they said that John Doe 2 and John Doe 1 were AWOL soldiers. Now, if they were AWOL soldiers and McVeigh has now been identified, that means that they must know the identity of John Doe 2. Now, they said this right almost from the beginning. Now, bear in mind that if they know that these people were AWOL soldiers, you know that they know the identity of John Doe 2.
Well, if they knew the identity of John Doe 2, why didn't they publicize it? Why didn't they let the world know so that the people in the United States could trace down John Doe 2, unless, of course, John Doe 2 was an agent that they have terminated?
Well, they apparently don't want the people to know who John Doe 2 is. Now, if I was trying to locate somebody, I'd put out an all-points bulletin to all law enforcement throughout the country. I'd give his picture to the news media, and I'd print it.
Now, you were in the FBI, again, for 27.5 years. You were head of the FBI in Los Angeles. I was taking a look at a Soldier of Fortune. This is not exactly the best. This came from a Xerox, but this is the June issue. And I see an individual here, and they say Robert Rodriguez, undercover ATF agent who tried to get the bosses to call off the ill-conceived raid, they're talking about Waco, was made the scapegoat. He's now the first agent to ever sue the BATF, and then they have another fellow right in front of him who looks strangely like Lee Harvey McVeigh. Is it possible that we're really talking about sleeper agents here? I mean, sleeper agents, people that have been programmed. We know that the government has lied to us before. We know that the President of the United States lied to us when he said that he was unaware that the Japanese were coming across the entire Pacific to bomb Pearl Harbor because the Purple Code was broken. He knew about that. The U.S. Congress would not, get into war with Germany. He had to create an incident. So he took the entire U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor, moved them out, at San Diego, to move them out to Pearl Harbor. He had all of the ships tied together. He could have picked up the phone and talked to Admiral Kimmel or General Short and let them know that Admiral Yamamoto was coming across the Pacific. He did not do that. This was deliberate. It was by design and done with malice aforethought, and resulted in the mass murder of 50 million human beings and this whole thing created World War II. Now, the President of the United States knew about that. There's many books on it. But would the President now, in order to continue this program, do such a thing so that he would retain his position as President of the United States, to cover up the Whitewater hearings, to ensure that he would be the individual in charge to bring us into a new world order?
Well, it certainly looks like we're heading in that direction. I think there's no question in my mind. There's an evil element in our society, in our system also, including the government, that want this power and that want to take over our government. Everything points in that direction. You look at the BCCI, you look at Iran-Contra, look at the House Rule 666, which was recently passed by the House, which will allow law enforcement officers to come in and search your house without a search warrant. Look at the Omnibus Crime Bill, which allows the federal government to do indiscriminate wiretapping of whole neighborhoods at a time.
Well, you were in the FBI. This would have been outrageous to you, to even consider this when J. Edgar Hoover was in charge.
Well, as a matter of fact, there was a meeting between Nixon and some of the top government people when President Nixon was president, and the CIA was there, J. Edgar Hoover was there, and they wanted to do this very thing, and everyone agreed except J. Edgar Hoover. He says, no, it's be a violation of people's civil rights, And he was the one person that stopped that from happening during Nixon's administration.
Now, there has been legislation introduced immediately after this to give the president the power to decide who, and that could be you, who is a terrorist or who is a threat to the government of the United States. The Second Amendment of the Constitution was laid out so we would have a militia to keep the government in check. If ever the government got out of control, the militia would come in to squelch their authoritarian control, because this is supposed to be a nation that is controlled by the people rather than a people controlled by the government. So I say, ask what your government can do for you, not what you can do for your government, because your government should be your servant, and we the people must be the masters. When Kennedy said, made that statement about ask not what your country can do for you, but rather what you can do for your country, that wasn't an original statement.
No.
It was not an original statement by Kennedy. Oh, who said that? Adolf Hitler. And this is what we face today. I think if you liked Hitler, you're going to love Clinton. If he gets away with this, I mean, all hell is going to break loose. I mean, we will literally have a living hell.
Well, they're building 80 new prisons around the country right now. There was an article in the Oklahoma Oklahoma City newspaper last June asking for applicants to apply for a new prison being built near the Oklahoma City airport. This is going to be a transfer point, and it will house 1,400 prisoners for a maximum of 10 days. And figure that out, projected that would be over 55,000 people a year just coming and going. Plus, they're building 80 more new prisons. Now, who are they going to put in these prisons? This is a lot of prisons.
Well, I mean, you know, you take a look at the black population. They passed that 3 strikes law. You go down into south central Los Angeles, and we have 70% of young black men, 18 to 25, that are either in jail, just getting out of jail, ready to go in jail, selling drugs, doing drugs, or they're unemployed. 70%. I mean, this is massive. And then these political pimps and prostitutes along the Potomac decide they're going to sell NAFTA to us, which is the SHAFTA, NAFTA is the SHAFTA, and ship our jobs, export our jobs south of the border and import slave labor product from communist China, and they get most favored nation status. I mean, this is insanity. What it causes is an exacerbation of the problem, an escalation of the problem, and we have a crisis creation, and it's got to be by design. It's got to be by design. Do you feel that those who control this government have been involved in the importation of, say, heroin and cocaine and drugs?
This goes back to the 60s. During the Vietnam War, it's a known fact that drugs were being flown in from Southeast Asia in military airplanes. They were placing drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of the dead GIs and flying them into bases all over the United States. This is documented in a Time magazine article, January 1, 1973. There's no question about it. I've talked to servicemen who are aware of this, Air America. Now, there was a movie that came out about Air America being involved in drugs, Air America being a CIA operation. So they've dropped that name. Now they're shipping them in from a new airline out of Florida, but it's still a CIA front.
Yeah, I've got the book, The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia. Lieutenant Colonel James Boegreitz came back after talking to General Kun Sa in the Golden Triangle, and he had asked him, who is the major buyer of this stuff? I mean, and he said, why, your government. He said, well, what do you mean? Your government, our government, buying heroin? I mean, or the CIA buying heroin? I mean, he couldn't believe it. And eventually he went back, and Kun Sa opened up the files for him and said, yes. They said, Richard Armitage, Assistant Secretary of Defense, appointed by Ronald Reagan, a good friend, close friend and confidant of George Bush, who is, he claimed, to be the #1 importer of heroin into the United States for the Central Intelligence Agency. So by spreading this poison, this disease, in the major urban areas, especially in the black and Latino communities, they create this massive problem, because it's not black guys and Chicanos who are going down to Colombia or going out to Southeast Asia and importing this. They bring it in to create the problem and then offer the solution. The solution is always worse than the problem that they've created. It's ordo ab chaos, control out of crisis. Now, in this particular scenario, the one that we're taking a look at right now, we see the major media, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, the New York Times, the LA Times, all coming out with this poison. And I'm going to the magazines, and I just take a look at the recent Time magazine. Here they have the right hand of God. Meet Ralph Reed, 33. His Christian coalition is on the crusade to take over U.S. politics, and it's working. Now, you notice in this particular picture, it's in black and white, and the way they have this photograph, one would take, if you take a very close look, you just put a little thumb over here, and it looks like the son of Adolf Hitler with the mustache, little mustache underneath. And this picture is either a phony, in my mind, or it was taken on a planet that had a dual solar system, because you see the shadows from up above here and going below his hairline and making it look like that swoop of hair that Hitler had. And then you see underneath his eyes, it's light. So there was a light in front of him that lit his eyes. That would have eliminated the shadow underneath his nose. And you're taking a look at it, and I know you're smiling, right? And I know that all of you are taking a look at it. Why would they do this in black and white if not, in fact, all of the pictures, or most all of the pictures of Adolf Hitler is in black and white? And if you go into the text, they turn and twist the truth so it makes it look like he is involved in some sort of militant neo-Nazi activity. What do you think about this picture, Ted?
Obviously. There's no question about it. I mean, this is a phony. It's not a real picture. Like you said, it's in black and white. It's not in color. And it's very obvious that the lights have been changed and angled in such a manner so that he does look like Adolf Hitler. I'm surprised they didn't just put a mustache on him just for kicks.
But it's deliberate and by design. Now, Time magazine was created by Luce, a member of the Skull and Bones. It's the Brotherhood of Death, that Faustian financial fraternity over at Yale University, where the fellows lay nude in the coffin. They're born again into a satanic order. Do you see any Satanism? I'm talking about raw, unadulterated Satanism in government, or any individuals who would practice this Luciferian theology in positions of power today?
I've talked to many people in the last 15 years, adult survivors, meaning somebody who's born into the satanic movement, and their grandfather, grandmother, mother and father were in it, or trying to get out. I've talked to ritual abuse survivors. Usually that involves people involved in the practice of Satanism. I've talked to hundreds of these people across the nation, and there's no question but that the satanic movement, which has been with us for 2,000 years and was really well organized, I'd say back in 1776 when the Illuminati was really founded and became active. There's no question that they've been working at this for years. And I had one woman tell me, whose father was in the military, that the U.S. Army is Satan's army. And I have information, documentation, that these people, this element in our society, has infiltrated virtually every level. Doctors, lawyers, politicians, oh, by all means politicians. And I can tell you a little bit about that, too, go into more detail. The government, law enforcement, judges, right up and down the line. I know of counties where I've been told that they totally control the whole system in these counties. Usually they're in small rural counties, by the way, because it's difficult, say, to control a county the size of, say,
the book
Los Angeles.
is the Franklin Papers, the
Franklin cover-up.
The Franklin cover-up. Now this is took place in Nebraska, was it?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you were involved in the expose of much of these things.
Yeah.
Now, 28 years ago, I produced the Illuminati CFR records here, and this talked about an organization of evil, an oligarchy of evil, operating from 58 East 68th Street in New York City, called the Council on Foreign Relations. We claimed, Myron Fagan and myself, who did the narration, that this organization does in fact control American politics and is set out to demolish this constitutional republic and establish a new world order upon the ashes of American sovereignty. And they created World War II, or put the everything in gear to create World War II, so that at the close they could introduce the United Nations, and of course Alger Hiss, first Secretary General of the United Nations Organizational Conference in 1945, put together the charter. He was from the Council on Foreign Relations. Nixon, who supposedly exposed him, and he was not the first individual to do so, but he took credit for that, was escalated to a position of power, and then eventually Vice President and President of the United States. I see this whole Hegelian thing in process, the Democrats and the Republicans, sort of like the sharks and dragons in New York, but the guy who's in the driver's seat is manipulating them just like they have puppets on a string. It's a political play. It's a play. And the CIA is simply the enforcement arm of the CFR. Now, you have some more information that just came to you on the wire just this afternoon before you came into the studio.
Yes, I received a fax this afternoon on the bombing, and I do not know if this is accurate or if it's been documented, but I will review it with you. And this was on a talk show. The host was Mark Boswell, and it's 12 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April the 29th, so this was several days ago. Shortwave channel 12.160, satellite Galaxy 6. And on the show, Boswell interviewed a 28-year CIA veteran named James Black and his assistant named Ron Jackson regarding sworn affidavits now in their possession, supposedly sworn by two Justice Department officials, which state that they were part of a committee of 10 who planned the Oklahoma bombings. The officials have retained these two ex-CIA officials, not ex, but they're CIA veterans, have retained a prominent East Coast attorney, and they and their families are now in hiding. This is what the talk show host said. Their affidavits have reportedly been delivered to a prominent government official who will be asked to launch a proper investigation. Now, that's interesting. That show was April 29th, and here we are well into May, and we haven't heard anything
about it. The LA
about
Times doesn't say anything about it. In fact, when the LA Times made reference to you, they just said you were an FBI agent. They didn't say you were the man in charge of the FBI here in the city of Los Angeles. They didn't say you were the man in charge of the FBI in Dallas or in Memphis. They didn't say you were assistant director in Hartford, Connecticut. They forgot to mention those things. They also forgot to mention your quote. They also forgot to mention the material that that you had. Well, they don't want this story to come out.
Well,
they don't want you to hear what you are now seeing.
Now, there's two detonations. We can go beyond the... First of all, talking about the LA Times, in that article that they had about me, it's just yesterday, as a matter of fact, they said that I was a self-professed expert on Satanism. Well, I've never said that. As a matter of fact, I composed a letter immediately to the editor, and I also sent a separate letter to the publisher, and I'm challenging them, and I'm going to make them, one way or another, put in all the facts and the truth about my lecture that I gave in Palm Springs last Sunday. They did not cover it at all. I mean, they basically did everything they could to make me look like I didn't know what I was talking about, did not furnish all the details. It was yellow journalism at its best.
Well, you had at one time 700, Ted Gunderson had 700 men working under him in the FBI. 700 with a budget of $22 million. I mean, you know what you're talking about. And I was looking at your bio and just going through that. It's fantastic. And by the way, the exact quote from F. Lee Bailey is, Gunderson is a person whose investigative skills are unsurpassed by anyone. That means anyone I know or have known. According to F. Lee Bailey, you are number one.
Well, that cost me a lot of money to get him to say that.
Yeah.
I might.
I take a look at the anti-terrorism legislation, and that's exactly what it is. After the Reichstag burning, Hitler said we must transfer this power from the people to the president, to the Fuhrer. And Clinton was talking about transferring this power to the president so the president would make a determination as to what group was politically correct and what group was not. And of course, he would have the police powers, and any two people conspiring to have a militia to protect themselves from the power of a Hitlerian government could be arrested and put in jail for a minimum of 10 years. Well, this is insanity.
There's a recent bill that's been introduced by Senator Biden that will allow the government to take sovereign citizens, put them in jail without a hearing, in secret closed sessions, and if no country will accept them, they'll be in there for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it says here, this would allow the Justice Department, headed by Janet Reno. She reminds me of Herman Goering in Drag. You know, it's just an incredible personality. Janet Reno, to investigate crimes based on the political beliefs and associations of suspects. That would put all opposition to the president in jail, just like what occurred in Nazi Germany.
And yet the American people are not aware of this by and large. And it's unfortunate because where are they receiving the information about what's going on in this country? They're receiving it from the mainstream media.
I started to get into the mainstream media and says, look, why I am not to blame. The plot, cracking the Oklahoma conspiracy. And they go to the plot, Tim McVeigh or Lee Harvey McVeigh here, into, they talk about this manhunt takes the investigators inside the mine. They've convicted the man already. There's no trial, but he's convicted. Inside the mind of this man and into the paranoid world that shaped him. Then they go on to go into these other individuals, the Michigan connection, because the militia there is opposed to the crimes of the president. Then to the journey throughout the United States, and then into, again, the crime scene, and then a fellow holding a dog. I mean, they really know how to milk this. I think about it all the time for the rescue workers too, the awful memories, and you go through the whole thing. Then they get into friendly fire. A couple of guys wanting to get their picture in the paper consented to hold up some sort of semi-automatic rifle and an American flag. Thanks, guys, for that. Then covered on the right flank, and then blame the bombers only. The President of the United States is blaming those who oppose the President of the United States for inciting some sort of bombing of the federal building. And this is all supposed to have taken place because these people are in opposition to the government. This is absolute insanity. And I keep going over the pieces. Then they say, Time magazine, this is the Skull and Bones publication. Time, how dangerous are they? Oh boy. And then we get into the picture of the little child with the teary eyes, like one of those old Keane pictures, a moment of silence. And if that doesn't, get all of the mothers of America, nothing will. Then they go on from there to more children and the people crying at the funeral. They are milking this. And Clinton, the President of the United States, is milking this as if he would have tit on a cow. And this is a massive media event. Then he goes into the accusing stance here with the pen, and then to blasting G. Gordon Liddy, who simply said, if the guys are coming in to kill you, and they're coming in with a black mask and hobnail boots and fully automatic weapons, don't let them do that. In other words, if the Gestapo is in to get you, fire back. Then they get into an article, a political interest by Michael Kramer, Why Guns Share the Blame. And then he talked about his group of psychologists that he interviewed here, said that those individuals who were throwing sponges at a clown, right, were more inclined to throw more sponges at the face of the clown with a gun in sight. So that guns really, just the mere sight of a gun, aggravates the event. So that guns somehow are guilty for, or the possession of guns, or the Second Amendment is responsible for the bombing at Oklahoma City. I mean, this is absolute insanity. And then they go into enemies of the state. So these people are really enemies of the country rather than friends of the country. And Patriots Awake, I love my country, but I fear my government. In fact, Ted, I think it was stated, I think by Jefferson, it said that we have liberty when the government fears the people, and tyranny when the people fear the government. And I keep going on in these stories, and they get into the militia and the great threat, the power of all of these people. They get into Gordon Call, Waco. They are demonizing the Patriots. They are demonizing. Here is another picture of this. This guy is sort of a clown here, Norman Olson, commander. He allowed them, Time magazine, to take a picture of him with all of these bayonets coming up so that they can demonize him. I mean, this is... Joseph Goebbels would have been proud. Joseph Goebbels, this is Adolf Hitler's propagandist, would have been proud of this type of political propaganda. If you subscribe to Time, drop it. In fact, Life magazine says, we don't take sides, we just take pictures, which is nonsense. And again, U.S. News, they're armed. Are they dangerous? The radical groups that hate the U.S. government and what they fear. And then it gets into the heartbreak, and they go into G. Gordon Liddy and the president again, and the manhunt and the twisting of all of this. And then guess what they do? They go to the babies, and then right on to the next event, they go to white power, an epidemic of fear and loathing, and they go from, of course, from the white power to the Klan, and then over to the Patriots again. This is pure, unmitigated propaganda. If you believe that the CIA, the ISA, and Clinton and company had nothing to do with the Oklahoma massacre, then you probably believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole and exclusive killer of John F. Kennedy. Ted, I've never seen anything like this in my life. It is obviously an attempt to convince the American people that they must surrender their sovereignty to a new world order. Now, you've got some documentation here which you need to get to the public. And if for the next, 10 minutes you can just bring this out.
Well, let's not leave the news media yet.
Yes.
As I said, I think I said earlier, I mean, they were aware in almost the beginning that there were 2 detonations, yet they still haven't printed it. And the FBI not only has ignored it, they've said it's not true, it's a lie. Let's talk a little bit about the bomb itself.
So you're saying that the agency that once was telling the truth is now telling lies?
No, there's a difference of night and day between the old FBI and the FBI today. I mean, they're putting out this is a fertilizer bomb. It was not a fertilizer bomb. It was a two-detonation barometric bomb. And in fact, the technical name for the bomb, it's hydrodynamic gaseous fuel device. And the way it works is the first bomb is detonated, and it's detonated through PDTN. By the way, that was found on McVeigh's shirt, PDTN. And PDTN is a device. It's described as a high-velocity explosive used as a primer in initiating the charge. It is high-speed, very sensitive, and used in small amounts. PDTN is not readily available to the public. McVeigh had it on his shirt, by the way. So the bomb is first detonated with PDTN as the chemical that blasts it. And then seconds later, and by the way, that lifts a chemical cloud into the air. And then seconds later, the second bomb is detonated with PETN. Now, PETN is higher in velocity than PDTN. It is standard and readily available to the public. But as PDTN and PETN were both used in the bomb, and both have been found on McVeigh's clothing.
Now, I've talked to a munitions expert who said, in no way did a bunch of local yokels put this thing together. That bomb sheared off concrete, straight up. And the ammonium nitrate bombs, according to him, is used by the government to like knock holes into the ground so that they can knock out a bridge or something of that nature. And if we take a look at TNT, it has a velocity of about 2,500 feet per second. This thing, you say, has a dual explosive device, which would in fact shear off this this building.
And I've been in contact with somebody that's on the scene, by the way, and involved in the investigation. And just let me tell you what this person has told me. He said he's involved in the investigation. He stated the Oklahoma City bombing on April the 19th, 1995, was with a dual charge. Now, he's there. Had it been ammonia nitrate or the fertilizer bomb, there would have been nitric acid clouds, and none of the workers would have been allowed in the area without breathing apparatus on. He advised that John Doe 2 was vaporized by design. McVeigh is also a throwaway. He stated that the debris field was collapsed toward the crater. There was something inside the building, probably another bomb, which would account for the massive destruction.
Well, they said that there was two bombs, that they had discovered two bombs. Then we haven't heard anything about that.
Well, there were two detonations, and then they found another bomb on the third or fourth floor. The first day, we didn't hear any more about that.
Well, if they found another bomb and we haven't heard anything about it, that means that whoever did this was working from the inside rather than simply driving up in some Ryder truck or a pickup truck or something of this nature.
I think there's a good possibility that the truck was used as a decoy and the actual damage was done by bombs planted by the bomb on the inside, and the other bomb on the inside did not go off, and if that had gone off, it probably would have leveled the whole building. But he also said that it was a drop and shear charge, and the investigators have looked for signs of ammonia nitrate on the pillars and the posts and in the debris. They have not found any. He stated that I am, quote, 100%, end quote, correct in my deductions and in my investigative efforts.
Now, his position is what?
He's at the scene. He's working on the case.
He's working on the case at the scene.
He's a criminal investigator.
And he's a criminal investigator, and he says that?
He says that it was a two-detonation bomb. And he furthermore says it was not a fertilizer bomb.
It was not a fertilizer bomb that took the building out, but yet it could have been a fertilizer bomb out front as a decoy.
Well, I think that no, it wasn't a fertilizer. It was a barometric bomb out in front and inside, is what I think. The people at the scene, they're supposed to have experts there. They would know this, but they're not. They're releasing this fertilizer bomb theory. I think the reason they're releasing the fertilizer bomb theory is because it's very obvious McVeigh et al., John Doe 2, would not have access to a bomb with this technicality.
Now, all
highly
the while this
sophistication.
is going on, the dollar is hitting new lows. It's collapsing even against the Mexican peso. And by the way, if you believe that the Mexican government, probably the most corrupt government on the place of the planet Earth, is going to pay back a single solitary cent that Clinton loaned them, you'd probably have to believe that the John Birch Society is going to make Mike Tyson their next poster boy. This is outrageous behavior on the President of the United States. I mean, it boggles the human brain. Now, you say this individual worked and is working
At
currently
the scene, yes.
on the scene.
Right.
And you have known him from in the past when you were in the FBI.
No.
Or you've known him
No,
since
he came
then.
forward as a result of one of my radio broadcasts.
What do you have to say to the public of the United States? What do you think that we can do, other than simply exposing this? Should we not take this tape and bootleg it, make copies of it, and get it to the world press?
Of course. But I don't know that the world press will do anything with it. However, there was one of the radio shows I was on out of Montana. I've been on about 15 shows in the last 10 days, by the way. And the host called me back the next day and said that the demand for the tapes on that show are unprecedented. He's never had demands like that before. In fact, host after host have told me that. They've called me back and said, I've never had a show like this in my whole career. People that have been on the air for 25 and 30 years. And in fact, in the Montana case, one individual, a businessman in Colorado, ordered 200 tapes to hand out to his friends.
Well, if we reach the people, if you reach the people who reach the people, and at the end of the show you're going to see at the bottom of the screen how you can get tapes of Ted Gunderson and myself on KDNO. We did a broadcast out of Delano in Central California. We're going to be doing more broadcasts around the country. If you get the tapes and you send it out to, let's say, the administrative assistant of a congressman, the administrative assistants will play the tapes. I don't believe the congressmen are going to open the package. They rarely ever see them. But if you reach the people who reach the people, the talk show hosts, the alternate media in this country and throughout the world, we can and will make a change. Now, if it is exposed that the president or the CIA or his agents did in fact pull this thing off, do you believe that any of these magazines like Time and U.S. News and World Report will give it any play or publicity? Because they have absolutely crucified the militia, just like like Caesar crucified the Christians in the Roman Colosseum.
No, they haven't reported the 2 detonations. They haven't reported the fact that it's illogical that the fertilizer bomb was used. Have you seen one real bomb expert interviewed by any of the major news media?
None.
No, none.
Zero.
None. You know why? Because the real bomb experts will tell you what I'm telling you, that this does not exist. You know, there's another point that I'd like to make, and that is that you know, they're encouraging and asking that new legislation be passed, anti-terrorist legislation. I have with me the guidelines of the current guidelines of the FBI in investigating terrorist acts. These guidelines are more than adequate to investigate what we have, any potential acts in the future.
Will you say that right into the camera?
Yeah, these guidelines here are more than adequate to investigate any terrorist group, domestic or foreign, that comes into the United States. There's no question about it. I've reviewed them. I haven't had an opportunity to review these in 15 years. I reviewed them just the other day. They just would work perfectly. There's no problem with it. There's no reason for any new legislation.
President Clinton is calling on the Senate to pass tough anti-terrorism legislation. Lawmakers are expected to vote on the issue after the Memorial Day recess. Mr. Clinton is appealing to them not to delete 3 provisions some senators oppose. They include broader federal wiretapping authority, chemical tags for explosives, and the involvement of the military in certain cases.
I noticed that Buck Revell, who was working with Ollie North at one time on the Iran-Contra, he was liaison with Ollie North, is lobbying for new terrorist legislation. Buck was number 2 man in the FBI at one time, and was subsequently an agent in charge in Dallas and has since retired last October. As a matter of fact, I was invited to his retirement party. Buck worked for me in Philadelphia when I was #2 man in the Philadelphia division. But Buck is lobbying for more anti-terrorism legislation.
Well, they're talking about a police state. So Buck is lobbying for a police state.
So I would have to say so, yes.
If we were to have the transference of power from the people to the president, would there be anything significantly different today than what occurred under the Third Reich in Nazi Germany? Would there be any significant difference?
No, yeah, we're going into a fascist state. I don't, the way things are going, the legislation that's been introduced, as I said earlier, House Rule 666, omnibus crime bill, where they can indiscriminately conduct wiretaps of whole neighborhoods. Look back at the history and look at the last 10 years, what's happened. We mentioned earlier BCCI, Iran-Contra. Look at the savings and loan fiasco. Look at all the people that lost thousands of dollars over that. I think that one of their goals, of course, is power and greed. But one of their goals also is to establish a two-class society, the ultimate rich, and maybe 1%, and the rest of us all poor, and slaves.
Well, they're collapsing the U.S. dollar. The stock market is making new highs. They're giving most favored nation status to the communists who have some 7,668 death camps at my last count, some 23 million incarcerated for slave labor. There's an attrition rate of 25%. That's 5,750,000 people die annually in those death camps. And it's rumored that some of those people don't always have a nice day. And they make those little toys and little things that you get for your family and your kids at Christmas. It is insane to support the communist regime that out-Hitlered Hitler at the height of his hysteria, just because the president and these political pimps and prostitutes along the Potomac suggest that you do it. And the GATT Treaty allows for them to import slave and child labor product. That's right. That's what GATT does. The GATT trap is just exactly that. It is treasonous, and it forces all children being born into these United States to have a mark, an identification. And you talked about Lee Harvey McVeigh and his being implanted. I have here one of the little transponders, and this is this little baby here has been injected into U.S. military. It has been used by the military. I was lecturing at the Waioli Tea Room in Honolulu, and I was shaking this thing and saying, "This is coming." I look out there, and the guy said, "No, it's not coming. You're wrong." I said, "Excuse me, I've got the needle, I've got the injector. This is the transponder that's being used for all the pets leaving the pound in Los Angeles. This is a Hughes Advanced Traffic Monitoring System, the new VIN number that they're going to put into the cars so they can ID those via scanners going down the highway and give you a ticket. And this is going to be put into people." He says, "No, it's not going to be. It is used now." And he told me the story where he had dug one of these out of the shoulder of one of his friends in Honolulu. This is being used now. McVeigh is complaining of this being used in him.
In his buttocks.
In his buttocks. And if we go to Guantanamo, right, they are now using these. And this is the equivalent of a slave bracelet on the blacks and browns that leave Cuba and then are brought back and incarcerated, and they simply they rivet these things to their wrist, and for the children, and we'll show you a picture of that, have them riveted around their ankles. It would be almost like having a slave bracelet wrapped around your neck. The citizenry will literally be on chains, and of course, I think it was Hitler, he was suggesting that all children have a mandatory vaccination at birth. This is criminal. In Dr. Anthony Sutton's book, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, he fully documents that Adolf Hitler was financed from Wall Street and Washington. This was done so as to create an enemy that we could oppose, an enemy that we could defeat, in order to bring about a new world order. And the propaganda that came forth under Hitler is like the propaganda we're having today. The same people that backed Hitler are backing Clinton. It's the same game. It's the same scenario. Do you see a similar, I mean, really, I'm talking about an exacting similarity between what happened in Nazi Germany in 1933 and what's happening in the United States of America in 1995?
What's taking place today, I would say, parallels, without any question, what happened in Nazi Germany in the 30s. There's no question about it. The incident was created, anti-terrorism legislation, greater restrictions on our freedom and liberty, eliminating some of the rights under the Constitution. It's right down the line. Take the guns away from us, the whole 9 yards.
Well, in 1935, I think Adolf Hitler registered guns. 1936, he registered Jews. But yet, the ADL seems to be coming out and putting out misinformation and disinformation. The government says that it can't release any information, but yet they are sifting it out through the ADL, are they not?
Well, what's happened here is Clinton came out, didn't make a public announcement for, what, 5 to 7 hours? He should have, and he was in a meeting with the ambassador from Turkey, I believe, or the prime minister from Turkey at the time. He should have immediately dismissed that and gone on the air, I think, and showed some real concern and care for the situation. But he said, don't jump to conclusions, but we cannot release any information because we have to worry about preserving the evidence, right? So in the meantime, we're supposed to do that, and the government's not releasing any information. Yet, somebody in the ADL has access to McVeigh because the ADL is releasing information to the effect that McVeigh had a business card on him from Spotlight, which is one of the publications out of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's like saying, well, O.J., when he was involved in this crime, had a copy of the L.A. Times. Of course, the L.A. Times would be guilty, right? I mean, they must have inspired O.J., and we have gone from the O.J. to the O.K. Incident. The media is simply gobbling this all up. The mass media certainly has not convicted O.J. Then how could they possibly go out and convict Lee Harvey McVeigh? I mean, does this make sense to you? I mean, the people that are being convicted, the groups that are being convicted, are those who are opposing the government. This is so obviously
being targeted, certainly.
They're targeted.
Yeah, Spotlight is a thorn in the side of the Clinton administration because they tell it like it is. It's a magazine out of Washington, D.C. It's a weekly, by the way. And by the way, I'm on the front cover as a result of some of the work that I've done this week. They've targeted the militants. They've targeted the radio talk show hosts.
And they're targeting the black Muslims. I saw the Savior's Day speech by Farrakhan, and about an hour and 40 minutes into it, I looked up and I said, my God, he's got the message. And I think that there isn't an alliance between the Patriots and the black Muslims. There certainly ought to be, because we're talking about the same oligarchy of evil that's doing it to, you know, causing them problems and causing us problems. It all comes together. And there's a great awakening that's happened as a result of Farrakhan's teachings, and I'm very happy about that, and openly seek some sort of alliance, because this is not a confrontation between white and black developing in this country. This is a confrontation between those who would surrender the United States of America to a global government and those who would prevent us from being surrendered to a global government. You have this statement, and it's important.
Well, I think that just about covers me as far as, you know, well, something else is kind of interesting.
Yes.
I don't know if I covered it earlier or not, but the FBI called me and interviewed me. And I put this fax out about the double detonation and about the you know, barometric bomb and so forth on the 26th of April. And 2 days later, the 28th, I received a phone call from an FBI agent, and he wanted to know if he should distribute this to other field offices around the country. And actually, he just wanted to know what my address was and so forth, and it was very obvious to me. I have information about, other information about, sensitive information about like a child kidnapping ring in the Midwest, where they were taking children out of private schools in Omaha, driving them in private vans to Sioux City, Iowa, flying them to Washington, D.C. for sex orgy parties with congressmen and senators. Now that's important, I'll tell you why. Because then they blackmail and compromise the congressmen and senators, and they tell them how to vote. So that's part of the plot. That fits in real well.
Now, we have talked with an individual who is a former sleeper agent in Operation Monarch. And that individual has stated that they saw McVeigh. They saw McVeigh, and McVeigh was part of this program. Have you talked to that individual?
No, I have not. I tried to contact that person, and I have not received a return call. They're probably like me. I'm receiving 60 phone calls a day for 10 days. I'm looking at 600 phone calls I have to eventually answer. I probably won't be able to get around to answer all of them. But the point is, this is not something that just occurred. This has been planned over a period of years and years and years. I mean, it's designed to compromise these congressmen and senators with 10, 11, 12-year-old boys and girls, because then they got them in their hip pocket. This is all very well planned and very well organized.
Now, to keep this ball rolling, would not the government, or those who control the government, the evilarchy, the cashists, the financial fascists that control this country, try to provoke or create an incident between the militia and agents of the government in order to slam dunk this legislation and shove us into the New World Order?
Well, what I'm worried about is another bombing, which would just be about all we need for Congress to go ahead and act and pass some anti-terrorism legislation.
And today is, what is it, the 8th, the 9th of...
May the 9th, I
May
believe.
the 9th. Could you be facing another terrorist event, another American Holocaust committed by the president or his political cronies within the next week, month, year? You need to demand an investigation. You need to reach out and touch. You need to start thinking, and you need to stop subscribing to Life and Time and Newsweek and start watching those individuals like Ted Gunderson, who's telling the truth. I want to thank you for watching Impact. The ball is in your court. The rest is up to you.